When we speak about love, it's easy to imagine it as something that begins outside of us, something we find in another person, almost like a gift we are waiting to receive. But if we look more closely, the truth is that love doesn't start there. It starts with how we regard ourselves. Self-respect is not just a nice idea or a slogan on a poster. It is the foundation upon which every meaningful connection is built. Without it, we risk entering relationships not as equals, but as people searching for approval, grasping for worth that we haven't yet recognized within ourselves. Think about it this way. If you don't believe your voice matters, you will remain silent when you need to speak. If you don't believe your boundaries are valid, you will allow them to be crossed. And if you don't trust in your own value, you will accept less than you deserve. This isn't because others necessarily intend to diminish us, but because relationships often mirror what we project. When we stand in our worth, we unconsciously teach others how to treat us. And when we neglect that worth, we invite relationships that reinforce our own neglect. Psychologists often point out that attachment patterns begin in childhood, but they are not fixed destinies. What determines the quality of our adult relationships is whether we've learned to respect ourselves enough to choose differently. Self-respect isn't arrogance. It isn't about elevating yourself above others. It's about holding yourself with the quiet dignity of someone who knows they are human, fallible, and still entirely worthy of love. There is also a philosophical dimension to this. To respect yourself is to acknowledge that your life has meaning. It's to accept responsibility for your choices and to act in alignment with your values, even when it's uncomfortable. Love that grows from this ground is not desperate or fragile. It is steady because it doesn't rely on constant reassurance from someone else. So when we say healthy love starts with self-respect, we are not speaking in abstraction. We are naming the first step of every relationship that lasts. You cannot give what you haven't first given yourself. You cannot fully receive love if you doubt that you are worthy of it. Remember this: the way you treat yourself sets the tone for every relationship you will ever have. If self-respect is the foundation, then boundaries are its visible form. Too often, we confuse boundaries with barriers, as if protecting our well-being means shutting people out. But that's not what boundaries are. They are not walls, they are guideposts. They exist to mark the space where our values, needs, and dignity remain intact, even in closeness with others. In fact, boundaries are what make closeness possible. Without them, love turns into something blurry, where we lose track of ourselves in the name of connection. Think about the dynamics of a relationship where no boundaries exist. At first, it may feel intoxicating, even romantic, the merging of lives, the giving of everything. But soon, without lines that define where one person ends and the other begins, resentment and exhaustion start to seep in. When we sacrifice our sleep, our ambitions, or even our principles just to keep someone close, we are not loving, we are abandoning ourselves. And when self-abandonment becomes the cost of intimacy, love can't remain healthy. Psychology teaches us that healthy attachment thrives on balance. The ability to be connected without being consumed. Boundaries are the tools that allow this balance to exist. They are not acts of selfishness, they are acts of clarity. They signal, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is how I can show up for you without losing myself. And far from pushing people away, this kind of honesty invites respect. It creates the kind of trust where both individuals feel safe, because neither is silently betraying themselves. On a deeper level, boundaries are an expression of freedom. To set them is to affirm that love should not be rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of conflict. Instead, it should be rooted in choice. A love that respects boundaries says, I want to be here, not because I have to, but because I freely choose to. That is the essence of dignity in relationships. So when you consider your own life, ask yourself, where are you saying yes when you mean no? Where are you shrinking yourself to keep the peace? Boundaries are not ultimatums, they are commitments to truth. And without truth, love cannot flourish. Remember this, protecting your boundaries is not the end of intimacy, it is the beginning of it. One of the deepest misconceptions we carry about love is the belief that it exists to complete us. We grow up surrounded by stories that tell us we are halves searching for our missing piece. That fulfillment only comes when someone else arrives to validate our worth. But this narrative, however romantic it may sound, is quietly destructive. When we enter relationships with the hope that another person will fix our loneliness, silence our insecurities, or confirm our value, we place an impossible burden on them. No human being can carry that weight for long without the relationship collapsing under the strain. What makes love truly healthy is when it is not built on a hunger for validation, but on the presence of two individuals who already recognize their own completeness. That doesn't mean we don't long for closeness or that we shouldn't lean on others for support. Connection is a human need, but there is a difference between seeking companionship and outsourcing our self-worth. The first creates intimacy, the second breeds dependency. Psychologists often explain this through the lens of self-concept. When our sense of identity is fragile, we look outward for constant reassurance. Every silence feels like rejection, every disagreement like abandonment. But when we have cultivated self-respect and clarity about who we are, love becomes less about filling a void and more about expanding what is already whole. We can delight in another person's presence without fearing their absence. We can accept love without clinging to it as our only source of worth. On a philosophical level, this is about redefining love not as possession, but as freedom. Love should not be a desperate attempt to prove we are enough. It should be the meeting of two people who are already grounded in themselves and who choose freely and fully to share the journey. that choice carries a different energy. One that empowers rather than consumes, one that supports growth rather than stifles it. So the question becomes, are you searching for someone to complete you, or are you preparing yourself to meet another as a whole being? Because only the latter leads to love that lasts. Remember, this love is not about finding someone to validate your worth. It is about finding someone who reflects the worth you already know is yours. If self-respect gives us the foundation and boundaries protect that foundation, then authenticity is what allows us to build something real upon it. Too many relationships fall into the trap of performance. We put on versions of ourselves that feel more lovable, more agreeable, more likely to be accepted. And for a while it might work. But sooner or later, the mask becomes heavy. Pretending costs energy, and the longer we wear a role, the further we drift from who we truly are. The tragedy is that even if someone loves us in that performance, deep down we know they don't really love us. They love the version we've staged. Authenticity is not about being flawless. It's about being true. It means allowing ourselves to be seen in both our strength and our vulnerability. It means speaking honestly about what matters to us, even when it risks conflict or discomfort. This doesn't mean disregarding kindness or tact. It means refusing to betray our core values in order to maintain harmony. Real harmony can only exist when it's built on truth. From a psychological perspective, authenticity is a vital ingredient in trust. When we consistently show up as ourselves, others learn they can rely on our words and actions. There's no second guessing, no fear of hidden agendas. And in return, authenticity invites others to take off their masks too. This mutual courage creates intimacy of a depth that pretense can never touch. Philosophically, authenticity is about integrity, about living in alignment with our inner compass. To betray ourselves for love is to hollow out the very thing we hope to share. Love that requires us to abandon our truth is not love, it's conformity. Love that celebrates our truth, however messy or imperfect, is love in its most liberating form. So much of the anxiety in relationships comes from the fear of being too much or not enough. But what if the goal was never to fit a mold, but to bring our whole selves into the space, trusting that the right people will meet us there? That kind of honesty might not win everyone's approval, but it will attract the kind of love that is genuine and sustaining. Remember this, when you honor your truth, you create the possibility of a love that honors it too. Anything less may look like connection, but only authenticity makes it real. One of the most overlooked elements of self-respect is the way we speak to ourselves. We often carry an inner critic that is relentless, a voice that magnifies every mistake and questions every success. Strangely, we talk to ourselves in ways we would never speak to a friend, a partner, or even a stranger. And yet, this harsh internal dialogue becomes the soundtrack of our lives, shaping not only how we see ourselves, but also how we allow others to treat us. If we constantly criticize ourselves, we normalize criticism. If we constantly diminish our worth, we unconsciously accept relationships that do the same. The shift begins with self-compassion, not indulgence, not excuses, but the simple recognition that being human means being imperfect. Self-compassion is the practice of offering ourselves the same understanding we so readily extend to others. Psychologists like Kristin Neff have shown that people who cultivate self-compassion are not only kinder to themselves, they also demonstrate greater resilience, stronger motivation, and healthier relationships. Why? Because when we replace judgment with understanding, we create an inner climate where growth feels possible. Mistakes stop being evidence of unworthiness and instead become stepping stones toward learning. Philosophically, this touches on the question of dignity. Every person, by virtue of being human, carries an inherent worth that cannot be erased by failure or defined by success. To practice self-compassion is to honor that dignity within ourselves. It doesn't mean lowering our standards. It means refusing to make love for ourselves conditional on perfection. And when we do that, we stop demanding a perfection from those we love as well. Compassion softens us, makes us less brittle, less fearful, and far more capable of sustaining love that endures. Think of how different relationships feel when they are rooted in compassion rather than criticism. One creates safety, the other creates shame. One opens space for growth, the other shuts it down. The way we treat ourselves sets the tone for the love we are capable of offering and the love we are willing to accept. So ask yourself, would you want to be in a relationship with someone who speaks to you the way you speak to yourself? If the answer is no, then it is time to change the conversation within. Remember this, self-respect is not only about what you demand from others, it begins with the kindness you dare to extend to yourself. When love is rooted in self-respect, it takes on a different quality. It doesn't demand possession, it doesn't suffocate, and it doesn't shrink either person into something smaller. Instead, it expands. It becomes a force that nourishes growth rather than a cage that limits it. Too often, people confuse love with control, thinking that closeness means holding tighter, managing outcomes, or ensuring the other person never leaves. But love that consumes in this way is not really love. It's fear dressed as devotion. Healthy love, by contrast, allows space. It recognizes that two people can be deeply connected and still be individuals with separate dreams, desires, and paths. It celebrates freedom instead of suppressing it. And here lies the paradox. When we stop clinging, love often deepens because it thrives in an atmosphere of trust rather than surveillance. To respect another person is to honor their autonomy, to acknowledge that their growth does not diminish our bond, but enriches it. Psychologically, this reflects what attachment theory calls secure connection. People who are secure in themselves, who respect their own worth, are far less likely to treat love as a desperate grasp for stability. Instead, they bring steadiness into the relationship, offering support without smothering, presence without possession. This stability creates room for both people to evolve, knowing that love can hold the changes rather than collapse under them. Philosophically, love that expands is of love aligned with human dignity. It recognizes that the purpose of love is not to erase difference, but to harmonize with it. It does not ask one person to diminish so the other can shine. It asks both to rise together. And sometimes it even asks us to walk away when respect is absent, because to stay in love that depletes is to betray not only ourselves, but the very essence of what love is meant to be. So the challenge is to look at your relationships and ask, is this love giving me room to grow, or is it consuming me? Real love does not fear freedom. It flourishes in it. Remember this, the measure of love is not how tightly it holds, but how courageously it lets both people expand.